Welcome to this session on social media fundraising. So just before we begin, I'll just give you a quick little introduction to me. So that's what I look like if you can't see me at the back, although I guess that might benefit the streaming people more. And my background is that I founded a social enterprise 8 years ago now, whose mission in the world is to use digital to help charities achieve their objectives. And if you ask charities what their sort of currently their biggest objective is, or the thing that's worrying them most, money tends to come up quite early in the conversation. So I've spent a lot of my time looking at fundraising in particular, and I actually wrote a book on digital fundraising, which is available from the stand over there from the DSE bookshop. But what I'm hopefully going to do is condense a lot of the useful stuff in that book, particularly around social media fundraising, into this lightning quick 1 hour session. And I've got a mix of content that is quite basic for those of you that are just starting out on this journey perhaps, and some stuff some more advanced tips kind of thrown in there as well. So hopefully there'll be something for everybody. So does anybody recognize this person? So this is Fiona Cunningham. She's 18 in that picture, and she created the Facebook page which sparked off the no makeup selfie phenomenon. So many of you I'm sure have heard of that. That started out as a kind of grassroots social media trend, ended up being taken on by celebrities, people like Gwyneth Paltrow here, too busy to even stop hydrating to take a photograph there. And what was interesting about no makeup selfie is that people started to do it, and it was almost like they were using the kind of charity thing as just an excuse to do something they wanted to do anyway. So, they were saying, I want to show off how good I look without makeup. But if I do that, I'm going to look a bit of an egotist, so I'll just say I'm raising awareness for cancer, and then that kind of gives me permission. And what was interesting, how quite quickly there was a backlash against that trend. And even there was kind of new trends, or memes as we call them, that circulated around, kind of lampooning people that were involved in this. This was one of my favorites. So from that kind of criticism came something really interesting for charities, which was people, instead of just going, oh yeah, I'm being ridiculed for this, so I'm going to stop doing it, they decided, well, actually, I do want to do something good for charity. I do want to do something around cancer. So people started to take pictures of themselves holding their mobile phone, showing the fact that they donated to a cancer charity, normally Cancer Research UK, who were the main beneficiaries. And smart charities started getting their staff to post selfies as well, holding text donation codes, talking about this trend. So here's an example from Copperfield, a breast cancer awareness charity, getting one of their staff members to hold up their text donation code. And this campaign was mentioned around 250,000 times on Twitter alone, spread much further through Facebook, but we can't get the stats on that. And it raised somewhere between £8 and £9 million for charity when all was said and done. So, this was really, I think, the wake-up call for a lot of charities about, oh, we really need to kind of crack this social media thing. We could really do to look at this. What was interesting as well is that there was a number of kind of little smaller trends that emerged, and you always find this with these kind of online kind of social media trends. So we had the over-made-up selfie. So that was one trend, particularly popular on Instagram. Interesting there is one of the hashtags on this is no cause. Just like, I'm doing this not for charity, I'm just doing this just because. I think the guys were feeling a little bit left out, so we had a series of trends that men could get involved in, such as the sellotape selfie. And we had the guys in makeup selfies, because why not? And we had quite a successful but quite short-lived campaign on Instagram raising awareness of testicular cancer called Sock on a Cock. So those were 4 trends that came off the back of the no makeup selfie thing alone, with some of those directly involving charities and charitable causes. So obviously, because we at Reason Digital research all these trends, I had to go through all this, and here is a picture of me doing all 4 of those things at once. I'm just kidding, I'm not going to do that to you. It is the afternoon after all. So I want to get honest about social media fundraising, because actually, although no makeup selfie sparked a lot of interest from charities, and I got a lot of calls from chief executives and heads of fundraising, I had to be honest with them, which is really down to the fact that you can't just inspire an individual campaign like No Makeup Selfie just by planning it, just by doing a fundraising strategy and deciding, well, what we're going to do is this year we're going to do a No Makeup Selfie style campaign, and it's going to be like that. I'm sure many of you have had your chief execs or trustees come to you saying, why can't we do one of these kind of online viral trend things? And there's a kind of deeper discomfort with social media fundraising, in fact, which is that we used to talk about e-activism, this idea that digital would come along and it would kind of, really help enable much more of the same stuff that would happen normally online to occur. So, but now that's kind of given way to this kind of new, more cynical phrase of slacktivism. And there's not just a fear that perhaps not only is digital not helping, but there's a fear that perhaps digital, and in particular social media, might be hurting, i.e. are people sort of scratching that itch to do something good by doing something fundamentally quite worthless to our charity, like doing a retweet or liking one of our Facebook posts. And that's kind of letting them off the hook for doing something more substantial, like, giving us some money. And some research was actually done on this. And there's some good news and there's some bad news with that research. So the good news is that people that promote charities and talk about charities on social media are twice as likely to take part in charity events like charity walks. They're more than twice as likely to buy products or services that benefit the charity. They're 3 times as likely to solicit donations on behalf of other people for charity. They're more than 4 times as likely to encourage others to sign a petition or contact a political representative. So people engaging with you on social media are actually much more motivated to do stuff. The bad news is they are almost exactly as likely to give you money as anybody else. And as you will know in this room, as most of you are fundraisers, getting people to give you money from standing is really bloody hard. And it is just as hard on social media. So social media is kind of no magic bullet. But there are some kind of glimmers of hope in that research. And I'm going to kind of build on that today and give you a bit of an unexpected, perhaps, tip about how you can go away and get social media raising funds. And it's probably not what you're expecting to hear today. So just briefly on charities and social media. Charities have a head start on social media. So 84% of people that were surveyed by the New York Times said that they shared stuff on social media to support causes or issues they care about. And that was compared to only 73% of people to help them connect with others that shared their interests, 49% sharing about products and services that they use or care about. So actually this was the highest kind of response in that survey. That people are most likely to want to use social media to talk about things they care about and talk about social issues. And not only that, but people are not just talking directly to charities online and seeing results from that. We're also seeing that what charities do online has a big impact on what people do offline, and that's something that is not often thought about because it's difficult to measure. So, what people are sharing online about your charity and how you're interacting with that could be causing people to make a spur-of-the-moment decision to, stop and talk to that face-to-face fundraiser in the street, or think about signing up to do a marathon on your behalf later down the line. So it's not all about getting a click from a tweet and getting some money. It's a little bit more of a long game. It's about a relationship. And as we know from other forms of fundraising, we have to build a relationship before we make the ask. Interestingly, some organizations are seeing that the majority of their income is going digital, and we saw that the Syria crisis appeal from the DEC was actually the first campaign where more than 50% of the income came from online sources. And in their report about this, they specifically credit social media and especially Twitter with helping drive a lot of kind of rapid attention to those issues. So we know that social media is working very well in terms of these crisis situations when it comes to fundraising. Perhaps we're struggling a little bit with others. So I just want to give you a real lightning kind of tour of some of the platforms that I think are most relevant to charities and social media fundraising. I'm not going to dwell too much on this because some of it is Some of it's stuff you'll already know, but there's a few kind of tips on each of these things about how we might be able to use them for fundraising as well. So we'll start off with Facebook. All you need to know about Facebook when anybody presents any stats about Facebook is just an unimaginably large number of people use it. So there's 1.7 billion at the moment. Over half of the UK is on Facebook. Interestingly, Facebook is cited in a third of divorce cases in the UK. So it's just kind of like just part of everyday life now. 48% of 18 to 35-year-olds check Facebook as soon as they wake up. Some kind of giggles of recognition there, I think. So, you know, what Facebook gives us perhaps is an opportunity for our charity's fundraising message to be the first thing someone sees when they wake up in the morning and the last thing they see before they go to sleep at night. So that's an interesting and terrifying proposition. There's a stat that's been doing the rounds for quite a while, which is that every share, or sometimes people say every like on Facebook, is worth on average £7 to charity. Has anybody heard kind of stats like that shared before? Yeah. So this actually has confused things a little bit. So where these stats come from is actually from Just Giving, and they release some really good research and some really good numbers about how much traffic goes to their website from Facebook and what, on average, a sponsorship fundraiser raises by sharing their Just Giving page on Facebook. However, some people have misinterpreted this to mean that every time a charity shares something on Facebook or gets a like, they should somehow be getting an average of £7 for that. And therefore, when charities aren't seeing those kind of results, they're getting nervous that they're performing really badly, when that isn't the case. You're comparing apples to oranges if you're looking at sponsorship fundraising versus kind of charity direct tasks. And we'll look a bit more about that later. And the stats, you know, in terms of driving traffic to Just Giving are really impressive. 46% of Just Giving's traffic comes from Facebook, and 80% of all the traffic that they got was from a mobile phone. So that suggests that Facebook, as with other social media activities, is increasingly going mobile. And that means we really need to think how our messages work on mobile. One little thing that you might have seen recently in your Facebook feeds. I mean, how many people here use Facebook? Show of hands, so pretty much the majority of the room. You might have noticed little square videos with subtitles that are really easy to watch without sound. So that's a way that companies and media producers are adapting to the shift to mobile. They know that you might be sat on a bus, or maybe, you know, it's 3 a.m. and you're led next to your partner in the middle of the night on Facebook, and you're not going to be able to watch a video with sound. So they've started subtitling it. So also we need to think about how to adapt our messages and our communication to make it mobile friendly. Nobody's going to sit there and read a direct mail length story about a service user on Facebook on their mobile phone. We have to adapt. So when you think about Facebook and using Facebook for fundraising, you might think about your fundraising page, your Facebook page, and how you can make that work for fundraising. You might think about the fact that, you know, you can have a donate button on Facebook now to drive interest, but actually not a lot of people are going to see your Facebook page. So although it's worth kind of tuning that up a little bit, the vast majority of people will either see it once or not at all, because they'll click that like button on your website or in a feed and bypass it completely. So really don't obsess over your page and how it looks and what the last 3 stories look like. What you need to obsess over on Facebook is how you look in the feed. So on Facebook, you know, somebody's checking it on their phone or on their desktop and they're swiping through a feed of stories. And if you get it right, your story will appear in that feed and it'll just be out of context completely. So what we need to do is obviously make that work really hard for us, because they're not going to get the full context of the page. Don't panic though. Facebook is a journey. Social media is a journey that somebody goes on. So they might see multiple messages from you over the course of a day or a week. So we don't have to say everything in one message. We don't have to take them on the entire journey from not knowing about us to giving us cash in one go. One thing that's a real hindrance to that though is actually this little thing over here, which is the like button. So you might think that the like button is just a really benign way to sort of massage the ego of your friends, right? Or just kind of lazily acknowledge something that they've done just by hitting like. Oh, you got drunk last night, great. So the like button, however, is a little bit more sinister than that, and it has incredible implications for most charities using Facebook today. So the average person has several hundred friends on Facebook, okay? But I bet if you think about your own Facebook experience, that as you're swiping through that feed, you're probably only seeing about 20 people's stuff all the time. Am I right? Yeah? And you might be thinking, well, I've added all these people on Facebook. I guess the majority of people just don't use Facebook very often. Maybe these 20 people are the ones that are most active, and all those old school friends and colleagues, they're not on there very much, so I don't see their stuff. However, you can try this as well. You go visit some of their profiles, some of the friends that you never see stuff, and you'll find that they are posting to Facebook really regularly, because let's face it, almost everybody's on there at the moment, so that kind of makes sense, right? But what Facebook's doing is deciding to hide the majority of your friends from you. And the reason it's doing that is it's absolutely key for Facebook that you spend as much time and read as much stuff as possible on Facebook so that they can show you as many advertisements as possible, and that's how their business model works. Pretty easy to understand. The problem is, if that boring old school friend that you actually have nothing in common with, they keep popping up in your feed all the time, and dozens of other people like that do, you're quickly going to get quite bored of Facebook and turn off from it, and that's not what they want at all. So the way that they've solved that problem is they created an artificially intelligent algorithm, which used to be called EdgeRank, but now just doesn't have a name anymore, which makes it quite difficult to talk about in these talks and just gives it an air of sinisterness over the top of it. And what that artificial intelligence's job is to figure out who your friends are for you. And the way it does that is it looks at whose posts you're liking, whose posts you dwell on when you're swiping on your phone, who does it look like you're actually reading with and engaging with, whose stuff are you commenting on, whose holiday pictures are you looking at quietly at 3 o'clock in the morning. All these factors focus in on it, and it will slowly hide the people's stuff that you never like and never comment on and never really read, and show you much more of the stuff from those friends that you're constantly hitting that like button and constantly commenting with, okay? So it kind of works like that at its most basic thing. Now the problem for charities is that charities behave pretty much like the most annoying friend in the world, in the sense that you only post about yourself, you keep asking for money all the time, all of these qualities that don't make a great friend, okay? But you're being judged by the same algorithm. In fact, you may be being judged in a harsher way because Facebook gives a lift to people over organizations. So you may well be in a situation inadvertently where every time you post a fundraising message on Facebook, the only people that see it are you and the chief executive. And that might explain for some of you the results that you get on Facebook sometimes, okay? So really what we need to do is not just think about how can we just post fundraising asks to Facebook. What we need to see this like is it's kind of like we've got this kind of currency, and we can expend that currency by asking for money and doing things that are kind of uninteresting to the end audience. Or we can earn that currency back by posting things that are useful and interesting to our audience. So one charity that Reason Digital does some work with is Alzheimer's Research UK. And we help them out with their website and this campaign around raising awareness of Alzheimer's, which was called the Share the Orange campaign. Did anybody see this campaign? A few of you. So the Share the Orange campaign was basically a piece of video content that Alzheimer's Research UK encouraged people to share. And their campaign and digital team were really clever about how they designed this, because what they said is, we actually don't want to encourage people to donate to us as part of this campaign. We purely just want to do something that's kind of interesting and that will send a message that actually it is worth giving money to this cause. So the video is all about how Alzheimer's is a disease and it can be cured like any other disease, and that's why it deserves research. But it also has this video, which is a celebrity doing something quite interesting, which is using an orange as an analogy for dementia that caused a lot of people to share it. Millions of people saw this message. And as a result of that, Facebook is going to see that Alzheimer's research is perhaps more interesting and start showing its stuff to more people. Whereas if all they posted was the fundraising messages, then they would see diminishing returns in terms of the number of people seeing their stuff, because not many people press like on a fundraising message, not many people press share on a fundraising message, not many people even click the link on a fundraising message. Does that make sense? Cool. So you've got the kind of terrifying job when it comes to Facebook of trying to find a way to make the stuff people are giving you to post on there more interesting. Some advanced tips for those of you that are a little bit further on with Facebook and you're saying, Matt, I know all that stuff, what else can you give me? Well, some tips about optimizing the posts that you're making themselves. Facebook posts with photographs tend to be the most engaging. They get the most engagement on Facebook. So although it's good to kind of mix things up, I definitely mix a healthy number of photographs in there. This is some good stats on this from Social Bakers that publish kind of reports on this stuff. Posts that are published after working hours see 11% more interactions than those published during the workday and 29% more than those published before work. Now, that's not to say that you should do all your posts outside of working hours, because we want to hit different audiences, but actually it's probably the case that many people in this room, all of your posts only go out in working hours. So I'd think about varying that a little bit. You can schedule them on Facebook, so you can time them to go out, a couple of hours after you've left the office, or over the weekend or whatever. Emoticons, we're seeing emoticons inserted into posts generating more engagement, 33% higher share rate according to Amex Open Forum, 57% higher like rate. Now that doesn't mean that you can just go, give us money, and then 10 smiley faces and it'll just work. What this is looking at is, of the posts that do well, it seems that the ones that do well, the author thinks to use an emoticon now and then. And emoticons can work quite well for charities because it adds an emotional component to the message, can make something more friendly. I wouldn't maybe go as far as adding a little tear emoji to a genuinely awful story, but you do have the option to kind of add that little bit of extra emotional component to the majority of your stuff. This is an interesting one. Posts with 80 or more words garner twice as much engagement on Facebook. And that's kind of an unexpected one, right? That you would think that the shorter the post, the more engaging it might be. Nobody's really sure about why this is. Facebook are experimenting with trying to adjust for this. So you might notice when you post on Facebook a very short message, it makes the text bigger, almost to like fill it out on a mobile phone. And that's them trying to kind of deal with this. So the ideal is either, a few words so that you get that boosted kind of visibility, or maybe a bit of a longer thing. And it shows that people maybe aren't afraid to engage with a little bit longer text. Punctuation also tends to get good results. One of the ones that I think is the most interesting here is the fact that posts that ask questions garner 23% more engagement on average, which is kind of obvious when you think about it. If you ask a question, people are likely to comment. But actually, we do a lot of work producing great social content. Sometimes all you need to do is ask, what people are up to this weekend. And actually, you can kind of lift your engagement. The Scout Association did a great post I saw a while back that's saying, hey, what's everybody up to this weekend? Anybody got any scouting plans? And they just got like 100 comments all about what people are up to. So, it's quite relevant to their audience. And it took them like 10 seconds to throw that out on a Friday, which is always good because I know we're all busy. A little tip for you here that if you post a link onto a Facebook post, that it will show this nice kind of card, we call it, with a preview image, a headline, etc. That's great. You should always be seeing that. You might want to check whether your website is set up properly so that when you paste the news story from your website and it actually picks the right image and gets the right title, that's quite important. However, if you delete the link, then it leaves the card in place. So you don't have that kind of ugly link cluttering your post up, making it look a little bit unintelligible. So that can help lift engagement as well. So those are just some advanced tips for you there. In terms of what to watch on Facebook, I've got two things for you. One is Facebook Live. So I'm sure you haven't been able to escape Facebook Live because Facebook is advertising it just everywhere at the moment. And like, how many people here have just had a notification from Facebook? It says your friend is broadcasting live, and then you open it and it's just like them on the toilet or whatever playing around with Facebook. So Facebook Live is quite good because Facebook's pushing it right now. So it's really good to think of ways that you could use it right now because it sends that message out. Hey, somebody's broadcasting. So it really attracts that audience. Good uses of Facebook Live I've seen from charities. I saw an animal shelter that was broadcasting live new arrivals into the animal shelter. So that was quite nice, sense of occasion. Here's the latest kind of resident to our shelter. So, that's something. Thinking about maybe other opportunities where you've got maybe a celeb or a patron in the office for a meeting, thinking about events that you're already organizing anyway, the finish line of the colour run or the marathon, things like that. The other thing worth noting with Facebook is that they're making a play into the fundraising space. Possibly maybe noticed all that traffic that's going to Just Giving, I don't know, and decided that, well, we could do that. So they've set up Facebook fundraising pages, and they're selectively allowing charities to create these fundraising pages where you can set an amount. People pay through Facebook, and you get all of the proceeds, less a 5% admin fee. So yeah, what's interesting about that is it's likely that if I gave some money to one of those pages, that Facebook would probably tell all my friends about that, and that might give your campaign some extra profile and make it more likely that one of those people would give as well. So yeah, Facebook always prioritize their own features rather than off-site features, which is why Facebook videos get more views if you upload them to Facebook rather than upload them to YouTube and then post them on Facebook. Just briefly mention WhatsApp. Many people don't even think about WhatsApp as a social network, but it was a huge threat to Facebook at one point, to the point where Facebook just bought it because they were that worried about it. WhatsApp has 1 billion users, so it's of the kind of scale of Facebook as well. WhatsApp is a kind of a private chat app, so it's individuals talking to each other or groups of people having group conversations, and those group conversations almost act like mini social networks. So and one individual, particularly younger individuals, tend to be in multiple group conversations, with each group conversation maybe being a different group of friends or about a different interest area. So you might have a group of friends that are into computer games that play the same games together, and they're a member of that group conversation. Really it's thinking about how we can use that as charities. It's a difficult one because it's all geared around individuals talking. So unless you have a big network of kind of individuals that, unless you as fundraisers are friends with all your key superstar fundraisers, it's going to be difficult to get into those WhatsApp conversations, but perhaps not impossible. Just Giving are experimenting with allowing people to share campaigns on WhatsApp. And they found that it had the second highest conversion rate. People coming from WhatsApp had the second highest conversion rate and gave an average of £28 from that network. So, that shows some promise. What that probably is, of course, just remember my point before, is individuals setting up fundraising pages and then sharing it with their mates on their WhatsApp groups. That's why that works so well. There's an interesting charity called Brook who support working horses and donkeys around the world, and they use WhatsApp groups with their volunteers who are out in the fields around the world, so that if one of them sees a good story, it takes a cute picture of a donkey, they share that in the WhatsApp group. All the other volunteers see it, which keeps them engaged, but crucially, the comms manager back at headquarters is in each of those groups. So she can go, oh, that's a great picture, I'll share that on social media. So they use that as a really kind of rapid communication way to gather content from the field. So there could be some uses there. Twitter, just talk about this real briefly. Twitter's audience is slightly in decline in the UK, 10 million users in the UK. I think they peaked somewhere between 14 and 16 million users. And there's rumours that Twitter might be sort of up for sale, or potentially their business model is not working. Exactly as with Facebook, your Twitter page isn't all that because people might not ever see it. It's good to set it up right, but it's not everything. Twitter has a feed that you need to consider your posts in. Now, distinct from Facebook, that feed doesn't kind of select content for the individual, it just shows everything. So that doesn't, it's not quite as critical that everything you post there is as interesting, although obviously it helps if it is. And it does mean that you can say the same thing a few times throughout the day because it's likely that your post will get missed by different groups of people. Ideally, if you can subtly twist those messages, so if you're posting a link to a fundraising campaign, maybe try it with a statistic once, then maybe a quote from a story once, then maybe an ask, just vary the same thing, even if the link is going to the same place. Twitter is also a good place to reach out to strangers and celebrities and other people, MPs, because you can message people you don't know. You can send them a tweet, and sometimes that works for charities. For example, you might tweet Kevin Spacey, something like this. And if you're lucky, maybe Kevin Spacey will reply to you like this. I think the first time that people really realized Twitter could have a fundraising implication was when the American Red Cross messed up and their social media manager, Gloria Huang, got drunk and accidentally posted about this on the official Red Cross account, which is like a nightmare level of kind of slip up. So she sort of tweeted about it. The Red Cross tweeted a pretty cool, calm apology about it. What was interesting, though, was that the brewery that was mentioned gave $2 to the Red Cross that day for every use of the hashtag #GettingSlizzard. So they raised about $50,000 off the back of that slip up, which ain't bad. In terms of people doing stuff with Twitter I really like at the moment, a couple of weeks ago, the British Heart Foundation launched an interesting little Twitter campaign. You're on Twitter, your heart stops, you go into cardiac arrest, heart this tweet to see what happens next, and then the hashtag restart a heart. And if you press the like icon, which on Twitter happens to be a heart, which is pretty good for VHF, you ended up getting a message like this, or rather 9 in 10 people got the "you're unlucky" message. If you'd actually had a heart attack, you would have probably died. Help us change this. So that was quite an interesting way to use that platform. Just briefly mention Instagram. Instagram, anybody here on Instagram? Cool, so quite a lot of us. Instagram has 400 million users, so not quite as popular as the other platforms, but it does have a much younger audience profile. 90% of its users are aged under 35. And engagement with brands is 10 times higher on Instagram than Facebook, so people don't seem to mind as much talking about and interacting with kind of products and brands, which could be interesting. I quite like what Charity Water does on Instagram, just posting stuff out that kind of inspires their supporters and paves the way for people to give rather than perhaps asking too often directly. So they post these pictures with inspirational statements or progress about how many individuals that they've helped get clean water. But they always do that in a kind of visually interesting way with some of their photography from the field. Interestingly, Instagram has started ripping off Snapchat. I was quite worried about that. So now you can post an image to your story, and those stories appear up here. And when somebody taps that, they get to see an image that they can only view once, and then it disappears. Now, what's interesting about that is they're really pushing that at the moment. So if you do that, your charity logo pops up here right at the top of their feed and gets a really good pole position in terms of their feed. So that's something to perhaps consider, particularly if you're doing something that feels kind of like you're out and about in the field and you're building this story. You know, you've got a fundraising event or a campaign going on. It can be quite good for that. Snapchat, mentioned it briefly there, 150 million users, and really a platform for people to take selfies and increasingly overlay funny stroke creepy filters on themselves, like Zoella here, who is using the dog filter. 60% of Snapchat's users are 13 to 24 years old, so it's a really youthful audience on there. So, you know, this is probably not an age group that can really help a lot of fundraisers, frankly, but there are some people using it. 2% of charities are on there, so it's one of the lowest penetrations to charity of any social network. One example of it being used for fundraising was the Red AIDS campaign. They had more than 70 million views of these filters, so they allowed you to take a selfie and then put a World AIDS Day kind of sticker on it, and to filter out so that you were just kind of applying that brand. So that resulted apparently in 70 million views. The people that interacted with the campaign on Snapchat had a 90% higher likelihood of donating. So it seemed to increase engagement, but one could also perhaps speculate that the people engaged enough to go to Snapchat and do that were also quite likely to donate to begin with. WWF used it in a quite interesting way as well, because Snapchat's a selfie platform. They took these pictures that kind of looked like a panda just taking a selfie and then said, "Don't let this be my last selfie," and threw that hashtag in there as well. They say all the outcome data on that is that they reached their monthly donation target within 3 days, which might not necessarily have been that difficult. YouTube. Anybody recognize this guy? Coney, that's right. So yeah, Coney was maybe the first time that a lot of charities realized that YouTube could be really instrumental in their campaigning and fundraising. So Coney was a video posted by Invisible Children back in 2012. Got over 120 million views on YouTube and Vimeo. They didn't publish publicly information about how much money they raised off the back of it, but I pieced together some different nuggets of information that the founder let slip in various interviews about how many different products they'd sold and how many donations they had, looked at some averages, and I calculated that it will be somewhere between $30 and $40 million off the back of this and the exposure that they got from that. So pretty significant result. But those, incidentally, the founder of Invisible Children, I think, was found naked, pounding the pavements of a city with his fists, and filmed, and that was uploaded to YouTube as well. I think he had a nervous breakdown as a result of all the exposure from this, so you may want to think twice before planning that viral video phenomenon. However, it's not just big charities with big resources. Although Invisible Children was a relatively small charity, actually, I think what worked well for them was not just that video, but the fact I think the Coney video was something like the 350th video that they did. And it's that one that took off, where many charities, particularly from a fundraising perspective, do one, don't get the traction they hope for, and then just give up on video. And that's really not a kind of winning mentality. Smaller things, so a bit more local to here, perhaps. This is a video of Aaron Bibber, and he is a barber from Tottenham, and his shop was smashed up in the riots, and he said he was going to have to close because he wasn't insured and he couldn't afford to refit the shop. So a group of local supporters made this kind of talking head video of him. You can see it's shot quite simply. It's not big budget. It doesn't look slick like the Coney video. And they set up a little blog with a fundraising page, and they managed to raise £35,000 to help him rebuild his shop. That was actually too much, so they gave £10,000 to other charities working to deal with the kind of aftermath of the riots. And there's Aaron in front of his newly refurbished shop. Another really creative use of video is this campaign, which I really love, and one of the early examples of a YouTube video really working for a charity. This is former Page 3 model Rian Sugden, who was on Celebrity Big Brother, and a charity called the Male Cancer Awareness Campaign pieced together a video of Rian, and it's kind of like a saucy sort of striptease type video that then gets very weird in the middle when Rian pulls out a prosthetic pair of testicles and starts teaching you how to examine yourself for testicular cancer. And the charity's target audience was the kind of blokey, laddish blokes that would be too embarrassed to talk about that stuff with their mate, maybe too embarrassed to go to the doctor. So really where this succeeded was in giving people a tool. And that tool was basically have a laugh at your mate's expense. Send them what looks like a saucy video that then gets weird in the middle. It's kind of like a practical joke. But in that way, they kind of co-opted their audience to share that message for them. And similarly, Coney had that hallmark as well. Make Coney famous. Help us share this video. So there's something about kind of sharing that's inherently built into those that I think is probably down to the, in part down to their success. In terms of modern stuff and the latest stuff you need to think about, YouTube's making a play to kind of own virtual reality. So you've got YouTube 360 now, which Charity Walter are using as one of the early charities to the party there. So people with VR headsets or with phones that you can kind of move around are able to film 360-degree video. And that's quite a cool way to kind of place your supporter somewhere and make them feel a lot of empathy with the situation. It's probably better for things like kind of international development than it is perhaps just say mental health, because it's very situational, it's very about the area. Maybe good for kind of crisis relief as well when earthquakes happen. Look at the devastation. YouTube's also launched a fundraising thing just like Facebook, so they've got these donation cards, so they allow you to trigger a donation card on somebody's video. A creator, so somebody that posts videos to YouTube, they could set up a donation button for your charity. Doesn't necessarily just need to be the charity that pops this up. So actually, thinking about building those relationships with people with popular YouTube channels is really important these days. You click on an amount, doesn't interrupt your video watching experience too much, and the charity keeps 100% of the proceeds. Google covers the cost of the processing fee. Google own YouTube. Cool, okay, so that's a whistle-stop tour of all the different platforms I think you should be looking at. Obviously there's oodles more. LinkedIn has relevance for corporate fundraisers, lots more we could be talking about, but I think that's a pretty good starting point. What I would say though is think about, really doing a good job on a smaller number rather than spreading yourself too thinly so that you're only posting occasionally on a large number of channels. I think that always plays better. You might want to register a charity account on something like Snapchat or Instagram, even if you're not using it, and just make like one post on your Instagram page that says, hey, we're not using Instagram yet, but you can find our website here, follow us on Facebook, etc., just to reserve that and see if you organically pick up some followers, but focus your attention mainly on a smaller number. So I'm going to move on now to some general tips around using social media for fundraising. So the first thing, and I kind of touched upon this earlier, is what a crap friend most charities are. And social media is social. The clue is in the name. So if you are, I don't know if anybody here has somebody that they really dread seeing, but somebody that kind of comes around to the house and they sit there and they drink all your tea and eat all your biscuits and they just talk about how crap their job is, how amazing their kids are doing at school, what a wonderful holiday they just had, and then they ask to borrow 10 quid and then they leave. And then you slide down the back of the door going, oh my God, I hope I never see that person again. The problem is a lot of charities are like that person in people's lives, but on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm chatting with my mates, I'm building relationships, I'm having conversation, and then all of a sudden I get this like, please give us money right now. And it's just kind of so jarring in terms of the rest of the dialogue on that platform. It just tends to be ignored. So really, if you want to play on social platforms, we need to learn how to be social. Now, the great news is we all know how to be social. It's just not a skill that we think to apply when we're sat in front of Facebook. If you don't know how to be social, there are various books on the topic, such as this one, which has this hilarious section in it about if you want people to like you, you should look like you are pleased to see them when they arrive. And it says, but wait, people find it very easy to spot when somebody's pretending to like them. So you have to really make yourself want to see them by thinking about all the ways in which you value this person. It's kind of absurd. But it's those same principles that you really need to apply to social media. Do you actually seem grateful that these people are following you? Are you actually trying to build a relationship with you? Do you care about the people that you're interacting with, or do you just see them as a channel to push stuff out to? One example, and I hope they're not in the room or watching at home, is this Twitter feed from Save Doncaster Libraries, of sort of that extreme, really. So you can see some tweets from them here. So this is like the opposite of being social in a sense. It's just kind of saying what we want over and over again, and it's not getting any engagement, no retweets, no likes, no replies, nothing's going on. And I clicked on this link. It's probably one of the few, if not the only person to do it, and went to this page. So again, there's a theme here about money. Not sure you can pick up that subtle kind of subtle message. Here's all the ways that you can give them cash at the top here. You can write them a check, give them some cash, call the treasurer. Then we've got some requests for volunteer help. Then we've got something about, I think it's about a local councillor or something. And then at the bottom it says, finally, a reminder of why we keep this fight going. And then there's this picture. So this is a picture of a young girl. She's from Doncaster. She uses and loves her library. And she's drawn a little picture and written a little thing about just why her library matters to her and how important it is to her. So it made me think, if only they'd stopped to think in a more human way, in a more social way, about what was interesting about what they were trying to say, ways to humanize this, then they would have probably started with that on Twitter and then led us into thinking about giving the money afterwards. So in a sense, they had the right angle. They just needed to flip it around. So consider how that applies to your cause area. And just think about, being more human. It doesn't have to be something like that. It could just be in the way that you communicate the message you need to communicate anyway. Take these two examples, two police forces trying to communicate a similar thing. Look how effective we are as the police force. Which of these do you think you would rather read? Which of these do you think you would interact with the most? So this one from Sussex Police got virtually no engagement at all. The one on the bottom was retweeted by hundreds of people, which meant that it would have been seen by sort of tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people potentially. So, just a slight adjustment to make the message more human can make a big difference on social media to get those messages out there. Also, don't overlook the need to interact with people, to reply. I'm showing you some examples from Twitter because they're quick and easy, but these things apply to all the platforms. Here's an example, somebody contacting Sane to say, I've been interviewed in my local paper about issues around anxiety. Sane retweeted it to share it with their supporters, their followers on Twitter, and sent Rebecca a really nice message. Now, we all take it for granted because we all work for charities, but actually, if you're affected by an issue or you support a cause, and the main charity in that cause sends you a message and recognizes something you do, that's like a big moment for you. That's a great thing. That's something you tell your friends about when you see them at the weekend, right? And it's probably something that leaves such an impression that if you, in the next few months are thinking about which charity you want to run a marathon for, that's probably going to stick in your mind. So see social media as just this kind of supercharged way to build and develop tons of relationships in a really quick way without leaving the office. And some of those relationships will inevitably pay off in kind of somehow unexpected ways sometimes, and we'll look at an example of that later. So, just moving on from being social, I've got a really kind of stupid, silly tip for you here, but it's one that's super important, particularly when it comes to kind of spreading campaigns, which is about the power of influence. So I have a dirty secret. And my dirty secret that I'm slightly embarrassed to admit is that I'm a massive fan of the Great British Bake Off. And I'm slightly devastated that we had the last episode on the BBC a few weeks ago. My favourite Bake Off contestant was probably the wonderful Glenn Cosby. You have any Glenn fans? Couple? Yeah, okay. So it was bugging me for ages, right, that Glenn kind of looks like somebody that I know. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I was thinking about it, and I think I was in the pub at the time, and it suddenly dawned on me, Glenn doesn't actually look like somebody I know. He looks really like an alpaca. And this is the reason that it made me think this guy looks like somebody I know. Now, I know some of you are cynical about this, and what I did, I thought somebody else must have had this thought, right? So I searched for it, hoping to find other like-minded people, find some other evidence, and I couldn't find anything. And I thought, my God, this is it, right? This is my one original thought that I'm going to have as a human being. This is my one contribution to mankind's body of knowledge. I must claim it immediately. So I spent a Saturday comparing and contrasting various images of Glenn Cosby with various alpacas, which I have sort of compiled for you here. And I will observe as your cynicism melts away and you are forced to admit the striking resemblance between Glenn and various alpacas. I'm going somewhere with this, don't worry. So, I did this on a Saturday, on Sunday I thought, right, I'm going to send this out, I'm going to tweet it. The problem is, Glenn Cosby is on Twitter. And as a so-called social media expert, I knew that if you're going to talk about somebody on Twitter, you should really use their Twitter handle to refer to them, in this case, @Glenn Cosby. Because that's just what you do. The problem with doing that is if you mention someone's Twitter handle, it's likely that their smartphone will buzz and it will say, hey, somebody's talking about you. And this time it was Sunday morning and I was just contemplating the prospect of Glenn Cosby waking up on a Sunday morning, grabbing his smartphone bleary-eyed and being confronted by this image. So I thought I'd soften the blow a little bit. And if you're ever slightly ashamed about your own thoughts, I can recommend just claiming that they happened in a dream as a way to completely dispense all responsibility for them entirely. So that's what I did. I included all of the images I just showed you in a big long thing optimized to display on Twitter. And I sent it. And Glenn replied not long after. And he said, Matt, you are an evil genius, and included a little smile. Phew. He's not mortally offended. And he retweeted it. And something then interesting happened. Glenn has 19,000 followers, and some of those people saw it, including Kimberly, who was also competing in the bake-off, and a whole heap of other random people, like the world champion at 400-meter hurdles, clearly also a bake-off / Glenn Cosby fan. So we've got some software back at the office I use to investigate how far a message has been sent. We're supposed to use it for understanding how far a charitable message has gone. But I thought I'd plug in my alpacas into it and see what happened. And the number came back that we'd reached 250,000 people with this random thought that I had in the pub. Not only that, but shortly after I got a message from someone called Charlotte Collette. Her pet alpaca had a baby a few months ago, which he hadn't come up with a name for yet. So can I introduce you, please, to Glenn Cosby the alpaca? And I messaged Charlotte recently to ask how Glenn was doing. And she said, Glenn's doing fine, but it turns out Glenn is a girl. So there you go. There she is. There's Glenn. So the reason I'm telling you all this is perhaps it's a memorable way to understand what, if you imagine what the difference would be from plugging away that idea on your own to actually reaching out to people and involving them. What I'm talking about is the power of influence when it comes to social media. So if this is you've just launched your latest fundraising campaign and you are tweeting with very few followers, alone in the wilderness of this big grey slide here, feeling like an echo chamber as it often does, be it Twitter, be it Facebook, whatever. Imagine how much more powerful it would be is if you could kind of whisper into the ear of somebody who had a lot more followers than you on Twitter, and they could share that to their followers instead, in this case represented by this obese Twitter bird right here. Not only would the message seem more credible because it was being talked about in the third person by somebody that their followers looked up to, but this person would also have a larger reach than you. In turn, some of these people may also share the message, and then that will get you seen, etc., etc., etc. And really, that's the kind of core principle of social media. So what I'm trying to communicate is that not all of your followers, not all of your fans on Facebook are created equal. Some of them, a small percentage of them, will have a really high number of followers. Might be because they're famous, might be because they're in a position of power, might just be because they're 19 years old and just really good at social media and they've got tens of thousands of followers because they're just good at it. If you can work with those people and develop a relationship with them, ask for their opinion about your latest fundraising campaign, ask for their help in terms of spreading it, you can have much more impact than you can just plugging away at that campaign alone, which is what most fundraisers' first instinct is on Twitter, on Facebook, on Snapchat, on Instagram. Post, 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 and see what happens. Well, actually, there's a cleverer way to do it. And if you look at this, with other kind of influential people, so here's a real-life influencer. Anybody recognize this guy? PewDiePie, that's right. If anybody's got kids, they will no doubt have heard the Swedish twang of this guy talking on his video game channel on YouTube. He basically just plays computer games and talks over the top of it in a funny Swedish accent, and it's kind of hilarious to people that are interested in games. And he has a huge amount of following on YouTube because he's really good at what he does. So he launched a campaign when he reached 25 million followers on YouTube. He calls his followers bros, by the way, to raise some money. And he set himself a target of 250 grand, and he raised $343,000 for Save the Children just by posting one video to his channel talking about the fact he was raising money. So that's at like the real extreme end. That's a kind of top tier influencer. But there's all different shades of influencers as well, from your local paper or local sports team. Your local footballers might have huge followings on social media compared to you, and working with them might help you get a message out there, all the way up to your PewDiePies and Stephen Fry's and people like that. Sometimes there's overlap as well between influencers and influencers affected by a cause. And one great example of this came from this guy. Does anybody recognize this guy? Yeah, Stephen Sutton. The train that I got on to get to London yesterday was named after this guy. That's how impactful he was. So Stephen set up a blog when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, which was about his bucket list, and he was sharing posts about him achieving the things he wanted to achieve off his bucket list. And he ended up working quite proactively with Teenage Cancer Trust, because one of the things on his list was that he wanted to raise £1,000 for Teenage Cancer Trust, I think it was. He kind of smashed it, raising £4 million across 80,248 donations. So, that was the power of working with Stephen, who had a phenomenally inspirational story, but also had built up an audience with his blog. And what was interesting watching this campaign was the way that Teenage Cancer Trust helped to boost the audience of his blog, which in turn helped to boost the results of Teenage Cancer Trust. They worked really well together, brokered media partnerships, etc. So, who is your Stephen Sutton? What would they look like? How would that relationship work? Something really worth considering. Now, I did promise you something a little bit kind of unexpected, and the alpaca wasn't it, by the way, to get you thinking about how you could make a little tweak to the way that you use social media and raise more funds, and this is it. So, before I get to it, I just want to ask you a quick question. And that question, because everybody here is on Facebook, we'll try Facebook, okay? So, if you imagine Facebook, what I want to know, have any of you ever clicked on a link that has been posted by a charity asking you to give some money and given some money, and that is a post from the charity itself. So it has a little charity logo next to it, the name of the charity Facebook page. The charity's posted directly, you've looked at it and given. Has anybody done that? No. Okay. Has anybody ever seen one of their friends ask for money for charity, or the fact that one of their friends is doing a sponsorship activity and they've asked for money on Facebook, sent a link to their Just Giving page or whatever? Has anybody given money because of that? Okay, so from pretty much nobody to, well, for literally nobody in the room, in fact, to everybody in the room. So actually, you probably came here today thinking, I want to raise more money with social media, but I don't know what the magic words are to say on Facebook to get people to give us money, right? Well, actually, it may not be that the words are wrong. It might be that the person asking is wrong. So if I'm looking for quick wins from social media for any charity that I work with, the first thing I look at is, right, how can we better coach, support, tool up, empower our supporters to go out and ask for money on our behalf? And you know, the stats are really clear on this. If we take email as an example, 1 in 5 emails from charities actually get opened, and only 3.4% of them lead to a click, not a donation, but just a click of some kind. However, if a friend sends an email to another friend asking for money, 90% of them get opened, and 1 in 4 doesn't just lead to a click, but it leads to an actual donation. So again, just that difference in a person asking. And I think what's great about this is your supporters, you know, you'll have a smaller number of superstar supporters that you can go to encourage to do this. That will be easier for you to kind of manage and maintain those relationships behind the scenes, and it will be trying to do that with everybody. So really, I'd be thinking how to do that. That does leave the question though, well, if we're not just going to keep asking for money directly on social media all the time, how do we profit from that? Well, I was talking to the head of digital at Oxfam about this a couple of years ago, and he said in his talk that day, to be honest, we don't make a lot on direct click-throughs from social. And what that means in human is, what he's saying is that if they post something to social media directly asking for cash, they don't really get much cash from it. So they have to find other ways to do that. And to me, that was a kind of good message for the smaller charities that I work with, that even Oxfam are struggling to produce results in that way. So you're not just kind of bad at this, it's not just, you're not just going mad. So what Oxfam do is they look at other things they can do on social media to build relationships with supporters, and then they tend to ask them for cash in other ways later. So one example of this is the Oxjam competition that they run. You can vote for your favourite mate's band. In order to do that, you give them your email address and or phone number. And this campaign resulted in 4,500 new individuals. 96% of them were new to Oxfam, and 55% opted into further communications through this kind of Facebook initiative that they did. And then they worked on those individuals to take them down a path of fundraising rather than just asking for the fundraising up front immediately on Facebook. So that's one way to go. And also, you know, every charity that I see that's getting really successful at Facebook tends to support their supporters to produce content and push out those posts as well. Not just about fundraising directly, but generally. You know, WizKids were really early to the party on this one. They encouraged their marathon runners to keep video training diaries. And the only payback they said to those people is, we will feature your training diary on our Facebook page and on our Twitter account. And that was enough inspiration that those people needed to start doing a training diary and to start producing video content on behalf of the charity. So actually, there's ways to more creatively do this. So that is that. I just want to give you a couple of final examples before we wrap up. One of them, I think, is about the difference really between how a charity behaves on social media and how a company behaves on social media. So I'll tell you, there's one thing that doesn't really work when it comes to producing social media content, and that is filming your chief executive in front of a brick wall reading out the annual report. That's one thing that doesn't work. Many charities have tried it. In fact, this guy's so interesting that you'll see that the cameraman is focused on the brick wall instead of his face. This is a CEO of a charity reading a board message. I looked this up. This video has 8 views. They have 13 trustees. Not even all the trustees watch the board message video, right? That's how. So who is good at this? Well, there's a number of charities that are good at producing social media content, but I think companies are often better to learn from. And this really kind of inspires me in the fight to produce really good social media with charities that gets results. This is the Dove Real Beauty Sketches campaign. Did anybody see this campaign? A couple of you, yeah. So what this was is basically they take a woman, they get her to describe herself to a forensic artist, somebody that does the sketches of criminals, and he can't see the woman. They then get somebody in off the street to describe that woman to the forensic artist, and you end up with 2 pictures, both of the same person, one not very flattering, self-described, one very flattering, described by the stranger. And then they put the woman in front of these in an abandoned warehouse, play some music, ask some questions designed to make her cry, and you get, you know, massive viral success. What the kind of problem that I have with this is best summed up by the first comment on the video, which is by somebody called Katie Fish. And I've got it here. I love your new ads. I hated the old ones. But if you keep this up, since I don't care about what soap I buy too much, I'll try supporting yours instead. So this kind of made me realise, my God, this is what's happening. So complete is Dove's kind of hijacking of a charitable kind of topic matter, i.e. body dysmorphia, low self-esteem, touching on issues around eating disorders, that actually we've got somebody that is talking about supporting a soap, using charitable language back at Dove. And of course, Katie, you can't support a soap. And if you could support a soap will do nothing to address the issue that is featured in this video, right?
Is Katie Fish real, or did the company do it?
It's a good question. Katie Fish's profile looks reasonably real on YouTube. As much as I would love to believe that isn't what people are thinking, I think the sad truth is that they are. So yeah, what I would say about this is that unless we kind of create social media content that inspires interest and gets people fired up as well, we will always play second fiddle to companies that are prepared to do that. So yeah, I really want you to think about being a little bit more daring with that. So that is all I have time for. I just want to leave you with one last little story. Does anybody recognize this person? You might recognize her blog. So this is Martha Payne. She's the School Dinners blog author. So she's really good at social media fundraising, so I thought it'd be worth featuring her stuff. Not only did she create something, a blog in this case, that had really good content on it that made people want to share it on social media, but she reached out to influencers on social media. You can see her interacting here with Jamie Oliver and got them to help her promote what she did. And then, only once she'd inspired the interest of people with her blog, and her blog had been seen by over 6 million people, she decided to launch a Just Giving page to raise money to build a school in Malawi with a charity that was local to her called Mary's Meals. And she aimed to raise £7,000 to build one school canteen in Malawi. She ended up raising £136,804.64, including gift aid. And this is just one of the school canteens that is being built in Malawi as a result of her digital fundraising and her expert use of social media to create fundraising results. So all I'm asking you to do is to be as good at it as a 9-year-old girl, and everything will be fine. Thank you very much.